So we've been to this kind of precipice several times before, and I guess some people you'd be forgiven to wonder, can we really believe it this time? This is a done deal, right?
Absolutely right. You really should believe it this time. This is a major development, large phase one deal, as the president put it today. He called it an enormous first step to the opening of China. Hopefully, we will be resolving some of the unfair trading practices. As you well know, the president has defended American economic interests. He's defended our worker interests against unfair trading practices. But after much trial and travail and experimentation and meetings, and my hat's off to my colleague, Bob Lighthizer, who actually served with me years ago in the Reagan administration. Mr. Lighthizer, at President Trump's direction, has negotiated a terrific phase one. It will take effect just as soon as the translations and the paperwork can be done. That should be inside of a few weeks. And then we will embark on phase two. And to be honest with you, I think this will stabilize the situation. I think this will add some business confidence to the situation. I think it will benefit both parties. It is enforceable. We can go into that. There's a lot of structural changes. We can go into that. And yes, there's a commodity purchases. We can go into that. My message to you, as it was, by the way, a week or 10 days ago when I was last on the network, we were very close then. We are there now. We are there now.
So you raised several of the things that we do want to go into, the purchases of agricultural and other products, some of the structural changes and so forth. But you touched on one of the things, and that was the enforceability of this. So let's go there first. What if the Chinese, who have not exactly been compliant historically with other trade deals, what if they don't do what they have committed to do? What is our remedy?
Well, okay, it's a fair question. It's an important question. Look, there is a process embodied in this phase one agreement. And no one is better at this, I might add, than Ambassador Bob Lighthizer. It will go through, if there are complaints, if a complaint is brought, it will be brought to the staff level. If it is not resolved, then it will go to a deputy's level for further examination and discussion. If it is not resolved at that point, it would go to the principal's level for further examination and analysis. That would be Vice Premier Liu He of China and Trade Ambassador Lighthizer. And then, frankly, if it's not resolvable, some economic valuation will be ascribed and actions will be taken. No question, there could be tariff actions taken as an enforcement tool. I think people hope it doesn't get to that point. These are good faith negotiations. But sure, look, I mean, if you look at the profile of the tariff adjustments, and I think this is very important. I just spoke with the president only a few minutes ago about this. The December tariffs have been taken off. The September tariffs have been halved, but we've kept the $250 billion original tariffs at 25%. We have done that in the interest of the United States, in the interest of the president and his leverage, precisely to deal with potentialities such as you've suggested, where there is disputes that are not resolved. I'm not forecasting. I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, that's the way we've structured this to make sure that there's an insurance policy for the American worker.
Larry, this is Seema. What criteria do the Chinese need to meet to roll back more of the existing tariffs? Because there was this expectation last night by the market that more of the existing tariffs would be rolled back if the Chinese are, in fact, acknowledging that they will make changes to policies around intellectual property and technology transfer.
And indeed, we expect them to make those changes in good faith. Those are part of the phase one. Look, I don't want to forecast. First of all, you know, in terms of what was expected or not expected, you had a big market rally yesterday because the president suggested in strongest terms yet that we would be close to a deal. That may have accounted for today. I don't know, you're about flat or up $10, whatever you're up. I don't want to do any what ifs. Phase two starts immediately. And I think to some extent you're asking a question about phase two. But let me come back to the phase one issues here. these things will be judged as we roll along, a day at a time, a week at a time, a month at a time, a quarter of a time. Do you understand? We're putting this down. The two sides have agreed after tough negotiations. We will translate English to Chinese, Chinese to English, and so forth. And we'll have a ministerial signing between Liu He and Bob Lighthizer. And then we will see how it works. We will see if the Chinese stay with their word. For example, let me go into one of the issues here regarding intellectual property rights. There's a section in that chapter that would prevent the kind of counterfeiting among tradable goods that's been going on for years. That is clearly an unfair trading practice. There's a section also in the IP area that says plainly if an American company is going for a license to do business, that any forced technology transfer will not be used by the Chinese. Well, we will test those propositions, will we not? Other chapters, financial services, 100% ownership of a joint venture, that is a big change. Currency transparency, no manipulation, that's a big change. But I acknowledge, and I think the whole world will be watching, to see if some of these key elements in the enforcement area, in the counterfeiting area, in the transfer of technology area, in the IP area, if they are put to good, honest use, and if our Chinese friends accommodate what's in this treaty. We will be watching.
Right. Let me go to a couple of things quick, Larry, if I might, because I think you hit on a couple of very interesting topics. One is intellectual property protections. Two was technology transfer, which you mentioned there. Do I interpret you correctly that these two topics are now settled and taken care of in a way that they are not going to be sitting out there on the horizon to be resolved or further resolved in a phase 2 deal? Are we done with technology transfer? Are we done with intellectual property protections, or might there be more to come?
Well, look, I think that's a better question for Ambassador Lighthizer, to be honest. Okay. And I'll just take a preliminary stab at it. You know, he's the frontline guy, and it's actually an important question for President Trump. We will see. My hunch is, Tyler, my sense is that let's take the forced transfer of technology. Some of that has been dealt with in phase 1. My hunch is more will spill over into phase 2. I don't think we have completed all the discussions there. Okay. And that may be true for parts of the intellectual property as well. Let me get to the area of... And by the way, phase 2 starts right away. Okay. Phase 2 starts right away. Cool.
Let's get to the area of the $200 billion in purchases that China has committed to make, of which $40 billion thereabouts is expected to be agricultural. What can you tell us about the above and beyond the $40 billion? What are those other purchases going to be? Are they manufactured goods? Is it natural gas? And there are people who say, hey, $40 billion in agricultural purchases from China is almost double what they have ever done in the past. Can you really get there? So if you address those two areas, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, I'll try. Look, on the ag purchases and the 40 to 50 range, that's over a 2-year period. Do I think it's doable? Yes. Does Mr. Lighthizer think it's doable? Yes. Does President Trump think it's doable? Yes, absolutely. The sense we got from the Chinese is they believe it is doable. And as you know, they have been in the market buying ag and other commodities, let's say as goodwill. I called it good mood music. So sure, that's doable. To answer some of your other questions, I want to just stay qualitative. You're talking about large-scale energy purchases. You're talking about large-scale manufacturing purchases, and you're talking about large-scale imports of U.S. services. I want to leave the numbers alone. I'll let Mr. Lighthizer and USTR elaborate on that.
Larry, if the contours of this deal have been agreed upon, why wait till January to sign the Phase 1 deal? And will we get a Phase 2 deal before the 2020 election?
Well, look, I don't know when we'll get a phase. Phase 2 begins immediately. On Phase 1 and the signing, let me try to be clear on this. Again, this is Bob Lighthizer's turf. there has to be a certain amount of paperwork. There has to be a translation from English to Chinese, and then I guess their version comes back from Chinese back into English, and then it will be signed, as I understand it, it will be signed not at the presidential level, but at the ministerial level between Lighthizer and Liu He. That's my current understanding. Do not mistake that for any stalling or doubts about the deal. It's just a question, I want to call it it's a clerical question, to use a very old-fashioned word. That's all it is. And as far as phase two, which begins immediately as we judge to see whether our friends in China adhere to the deal, well, I have no idea. I wouldn't want to put a timetable on any of that stuff. One of the things I've learned, and I've shared this with you, Tyler, many times, it's not a good idea to make predictions about these things. Maybe it's not a good idea to make predictions at all. All I know is we have phase one. It is done. It is completed. It begins today, at least in the technical spirit of the thing. It will be signed as soon as possible, and phase two begins. And look, this is a tremendous accomplishment. I will say again, President Trump has changed the narrative towards China.
Okay.
And they pointed out the unfair trading practices, and he has bound and determined to defend the interests of the United States, its economy, its workforce, and its national security. I don't think that will ever change this new narrative. And I think this deal today gives up some, both sides. That's the way you negotiate. But we definitely continue to have an insurance policy in terms of some of the ongoing tariffs and the discussions and the structural changes in these documents.
You've been very generous with your time, Larry, and I know they're trying to pull you away. I'd love to talk about how your thinking about tariffs has evolved over the past few years. We'll save that for another occasion. But let me, you've been in the 3% camp on U.S. GDP growth for 2020, and you say we can get there early in 2020. We're not there now. The fourth quarter is trending in the 2% neighborhood. What does this deal mean? What is the increment, if any, to American economic growth because of this trade deal?
Well, I think it's going to be pro-growth. I think it's going to help business confidence, business investment confidence. That's what we've been told. We just had business roundtable people in yesterday or the day before. Putting a number on it, I don't know. It's probably worth a half a point of GDP, but it's almost impossible to say. I think the fourth quarter is going to surprise everybody with strength. And the way the stock market's going and the cyclical sectors in the stock market, Tyler, I still try to follow some of that. It looks like 2020 is going to be a very, very strong economic year. And you've already seen the jobs and the wages and the production workers are doing better than their managers, and take-home pay is up by about $5,000. We're in very good shape.
On that note, we'll leave it. Larry Kudlow, thank you as always.